I have three fairly easy requests here. The first is to establish a capital fund to administer a grant award. We were awarded funding under the State Archives to undertake enhancements to the E911 system for the dispatchers and to address this new issue with building and fire codes of identifying all the buildings that have roof trusses so that when the firemen arrive, they know the structure. So I just would like to request the committee's authorization to establish that capital fund.
Okay. Moved by John, second by Evelyn. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
The second resolution request is to enter into a contract with Mohawk Valley GIS. As part of the grant application process, we had to identify WB or MWBE compliance as part of the grant application. The grant application was funded with the understanding that that we would contract with this WBE firm for some of the activities. I have talked with Julie in purchasing, and we're fine as far as the purchasing policy goes of awarding this contract.
Okay. Someone like to move that? Evelyn, seconded by John. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next.
Okay, this is the third one is something that we do on a yearly basis. The county sets aside funding in the 8029 codes for use as matching funds for the First Wilderness Program. In order to actually count as matching funds, the Treasurer's Office requires that they be moved to a capital fund and dispersed that way so that it can be tracked. So we're just making a request to transfer the remaining balance of 8029 into the capital fund.
Okay. Moved by Fred, seconded by John. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
And that's all I have for the committee.
That's it. Thank you. There's no referrals, no information for discussion. Privilege of the floor. Okay. We'll move on to economic growth.
Good morning. A brief update on a number of topics. Talk a little bit about sewer, job training, environment, fly-in, and broadband. So we kind of want to hit those topics. Number one, EDC has been coordinating the Department of State cooperative grant between a number of communities. City of Glens Falls, the town of Queensbury, the wastewater treatment plant at Glens Falls, the Washington County Sewer District number 2, the town of Moreau, and the town of Kingsbury. And the purpose of that grant is to kind of do a couple of things. One is to examine the governance of the sewage treatment plant operations in Glens Falls and Fort Edward to see if there can be a partnership, a sharing of resources to reduce the cost. Looking at also beyond that, whether or not some type of sewer district, a united sewer district, may be appropriate. Secondly, and very importantly, speaking of economic growth, is really to identify and to work with the town of Queensbury, the town of Moreau, and the town of Kingsbury to see where there can be additional connectivity, what those costs are, and for the town of Kingsbury and Moreau to a certain extent as to where they would connect into. Would they continue to connect into the city of Glens Falls wastewater treatment plant or the Fort Edward wastewater treatment plant along the Hudson River there too? And also probably coming to the top a lot quicker is the issue of biosolids disposal. And that means whether it's grass clippings or whether it is food waste, well, how are you going to be able to handle this, along also with the grease from the various restaurants? So rather than trying to have individual communities try to resolve this issue, collectively this group is looking on a regional answer that may end up with one facility that would handle all of those things I mentioned, or at a couple of different locations, because biosolids is very important to be eliminating that from the waste stream and turning it around into a more productive area. And so what we've done is we've arranged for two committees, a technical committee consisting of Chris Harrington from Queensbury, Steve Gersler from the city, Joe Brilling from Washington County, to meet, and then the policy committee is meeting on a regular basis, and that includes Supervisor John Stroud here, along with other officials here. So we hope to have an initial report to share with the rest of the county on the issue of biosolids sometime in, they said November, but I realistically would say it would be December before we see that report. They're doing an inventory of all the food waste in the area, and whether it's the Warren County Jail, what do you do with your food waste at this point? The correctional facilities over in Comstock, the Washington County, and the maximum security. So to look and pull that all together. And the other issue is the grease. You can't have that grease going down the storm line or sanitary lines because it just bundles up together and becomes a mass and creates all kinds of fun for the sewage treatment plant operators on that. Secondly, we recently, ABC coordinated the EPA job training program. We had our third and final graduation class last week. A total of 55 individuals have graduated with a number of certificates that probably would cost about $15,000 to $20,000 if the individual went out and did those certificates, from the 40-hour HAZWOPER class to lead, asbestos, confined space in other courses. Out of that 55 right now, we have approximately 22 that are employed in a variety of employment sectors, from Finch in the paper industry to some engineering firms to locations down at Ace and Target in that particular area. We are required to continue to monitor those 55 graduates for a couple of years. This was a great partnership, starting with the help from Senator Schumer, who assisted us in the grant, along with EPA, who provided the money, but it would not have been as, I think, successful without the help of Senator Little and Dan Steck, who worked very closely with us and the Department of Labor, so that we were able to coordinate at the local level with the help of Warren County One Stop and Chris Hungetzer here, the whole issue of having and utilize the facility at One Stop for the interviews, for the questionnaires to be filled out, and then the local 773, we utilized their facility. So we hope to apply for another grant this fall, and that would be available for us late next year, but it's a very, very competitive grant. There's only about 30 to 35 localities in the country that receive that money. So we will need some letters of support forthcoming, as well as getting some letters of support from the graduates as well. Another item talking about the environment is that we are working closely in Warren County with Supervisor Fred Monroe from the town of Chester on an environmental risk assessment grant, along with two communities in Saratoga, Corinth, Hadley, the town of Moreau in Saratoga, and Hudson Falls, for Phase 1 and Phase 2 risk assessment. This is for either abandoned property, an old gas station, an old propane location, a closed-down dry cleaning establishment, or if there is a particular abandoned house or property that is looking to be developed by the property owner, or if it's taken over by the municipality, a Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental risk assessment can be undertaken through this grant at no cost to the municipality and at no cost to the property owner. Because you have a piece of property that has some questions, if they're underground gas tanks or so forth, but it's not sure. This money would provide an answer for the property owner, so that he's prepared to negotiate with the owner. An owner coming in, a prospective owner coming in, is going to have that done by, the bank is going to require that. So I think it's a helpful tool. It's not applicable in every situation, but it's certainly another opportunity to put a piece of property that is abandoned for all practical purposes, except the taxes are still being paid by the property owner. And last Friday, had the opportunity to spend some time with Fred, and we looked at a few sites up there that potentially have that, and we've been looking at sites in Corinth and Hadley. And again, we needed to do this on a regional basis. If we're successful, we would look to expand that program to include more communities. One of the other things I said, I briefly talk about the fly-in. One of the charges that Warren County Board gave the marketing committee of the airport was to look at various potential projects to increase recognition, publicity of the airport, but also provide some exposure for pilots and owners. And through your permission, the group has applied for consideration of a regional fly-in. We were not successful for the 2016. We are in the running for 2017 and perhaps 2018, which would be a fly-in over 500 planes coming into the Warren County Airport. Sometime we are identifying a date, probably in July of 2017. It's a competitive situation. We have met conference calls with Rich Air, fixed-based operator, with Ross, with Warren County Tourism, and EDC, and we'll be putting together an additional presentation. The organization group will be coming up in January to look at the airport and the area. So we would be sitting down and working closely with the tourism and putting kind of a day-long presentation, reach out to the Great Escape and other venue properties in the area. So this not only attracts the pilots, airport owners in, but as well as tourists to come in, and maybe there'd be a section for kites, John, that you could have some kites flying in that area as your proposal. But again, that's kind of, I think, an area where we've been kind of lacking, and these are opportunities that have this, and this is through the Association of Pilots and Owners, and they've been very successful in other areas, and they select one airport in a region, and they do about 3 or 4 of these a year in different regions. So I think it's very helpful for us to look at and see if we can be successful in putting this together. The bulk of the costs are paid for through the association and would not be, but I think we've got a leg up because the county is well experienced with handling the Balloon Festival for all these years in terms of traffic and so forth. We'll keep everybody updated and posted as we go forward on that. Finally, I wanted to briefly talk about.
And can I just
Yes,
ask, is
sure.
that through the EAA? Is that the
No.
experimental
Yeah,
aircraft?
No, it is not. No, this is
Okay.
regular. These are regular air traffic
Okay. Oh, okay.
coming in. Yeah, it's not experimental. We'd have Dr. Romanazzi up here if it was experimental from Mike Dennis in Glens Falls. On broadband, the governor has postponed the timing of the application principally because a number of service providers and consultants that have worked for AGC, Adirondack Gateway Council, felt that the proposal was not sufficient enough to help rural and undeveloped areas face the issue of cell and broadband fiber optics in the area. The original proposal was going to limit the grant to only 20%, meaning that 80% would have to come either from the private sector or generally from the municipalities. So as a result of further discussions, we have submitted our position indicating that there should be, number one, a priority given to areas where there definitely is severe lack of cell as well as fiber optics, so that those areas of the state would be giving an additional credit so that it would come closer to a 50-50 sharing of dollars between the community and the service providers. Also, what is important to note is we know that Time Warner is going through a selling of their company to Charter, which is out of North Carolina. Charter's nearest franchises are up in the Plattsburgh, Clinton County area. They tend to be more of a moderate density to some rural areas. The problem is that we all know that the bulk of the service providers are looking at the areas in our area of the greater Glens Falls, Queensbury area, because that's where the mass is, that's where the bulk of the population is. But we also have been advocating from Evelyn's efforts to the chairman, to all the other supervisors up county, that this is vital for economic needs for the continuation of growth in Warren County, Washington County, northern Saratoga, as well as the Adirondack Park Agency. So we're hopeful that through our input, along with many other communities, organizations, that there will be an adjustment in the grant application criteria, which will probably be coming out later this year, early next year. There also are components within there that are very positive for the more populated areas, such as in the Queensbury, the Glens Falls area, so that they would also have an opportunity to improve with the use of fiber optics in the area. But currently, right now, it was very questionable under the current grant whether or not any service providers would actually be involved at the 20% level, because it just does not make any financial sense for them to undertake that. Yes?
So the big splash about broadband, can we expect it to come in our areas where we don't have it?
At the 20% level, what was happening is that the governor's office, Empire State Development, the broadband group, David Solwell, and our consultant from AGC and many others were meeting and just coming to the conclusion that the 20% grant, similar to kind of a NYSERDA incentive, that 20% was just not enough to help in the undeveloped rural areas such as Warren County, such as Washington County, the Adirondacks, and other parts of the state. So they've gone back to the drawing boards, in essence, to redesign the criteria. I think that'll be more favorable, Kevin, for purposes of us going forward in an application.
So really, I mean, they're going to speed up the ones that already have it, but they're going to forget the ones that don't have it.
I think that's being changed.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Well,
that
that's
would
what
be.
it sounds like, yeah.
That
Well,
would,
that, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you know, that was the concern when this program was announced, and I think we even passed a resolution here, not we intend to do, that we should, that maybe have a two-tiered system, one for the rural areas where it's gonna take more than 20%, and one for the more urban areas where maybe 20%'s enough.
So they're kind of modifying that a
Yeah.
little bit, Fred, but that's the intent is to up criteria and the percentage from a 20% factor to around 50% for the rural areas, in undeveloped areas in order that to happen. But at the same time, give that initiative to those developed areas as an incentive to further develop the fiber optics for purposes of economic development and commerce. But certainly right now, it would be very difficult under the old rules if we had applied whether or not there would have been any service providers interested. And so what would have happened, service providers said, we can't do that, we need more of a subsidy, so they would have come knocking on your door.
Yeah, but just, they make a big splash about this, but we're not getting the help.
I think that, I think the governor has recognized this, Kevin, and I think that if the governor wasn't recognizing this, he just would have issued the RFP and let's see what happens. So I think he recognized that. I think David Solwell, the head of New York Connect, has spent a lot of times up here in the Adirondacks, and he realizes the importance of that. Beyond that, we are looking at two other components that may be of help to us so that we could reduce any local share by working with the Federal Communication Commission and with USDA, which has some programs that we are looking to tie into the state money. So it would be a multiple application, if you will, between those three agencies to do that. But I'm confident that we can get closer to the 50% share, which would immensely help Warren County specifically.
Evelyn has a question, then John.
Yeah, I was just wondering, has there been any discussion about amending the new speed requirements? Because that, I know, is a concern. When you have dial-up to go to these new requirements, that's a
Yeah,
huge and ridiculous jump.
I mean,
for
that was
small
a
community.
well-intended goal of, the state for these, but the reality is, the mapping they've done has shown that there's so many areas upstate that could not meet that, and the expense on doing that would be very prohibitive.
So do they know that, I mean, or is there any discussion about amending that in the requirements? So
Yeah,
that-
the whole criteria is dramatically being amended at this point.
That's a relief.
Which is good. So I think it's gonna give a fair opportunity for the rural communities, for Warren County. I think that, it would've been very difficult, unless we were able to get tremendous amount of funding from USDA and FCC to make up that differential there.
Has the USDA changed their requirements? Because I know one of the troubles we ran into was if one house has broadband in your census block, you're considered covered even
Yep,
if you're
and
not.
also FCC had some issues dealing with the poverty level at one time, and we did a search of Warren, Washington counties, and nowhere in Warren, Washington, we would have met their definition of poverty for funding under
Right.
FCC.
Those were difficulties we faced when
yes.
we looked at those
And-
avenues, and they were closed to us.
The other thing that's happened, so I'm confident we're gonna get some changes. The other thing that happened is that this, we pushed forward with the issuance of there is still lack of cell coverage in many areas, and that was not really brought that out significantly in the funding. It really your first brush on this looked at fiber optics broadband without cell.
Mhm.
So.
And we know the cell's an important component.
That's a very important component, and we've also utilized that with the help of Brian LaFleur over in Washington County Emergency, is the issue of public safety,
Mhm.
not only with the cell, but also more cell towers in the area as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Hi, John.
Question, when you say 50/50 funding, does that mean that the grant funding, and maybe municipal contributions, can be used to defray the expenses of infrastructure? You know, the
Yes.
towers, the antennae, fiber optic cable?
The 50% share you can allocate, you can do a couple of things. 50% share of a grant could mean if this region wanted to develop their own municipal system, you could do that, which I'm not sure, that's an option. I'm not sure that that's the preferred way. Or you can utilize that 50% in conjunction with service providers. Similar to like a NYSERDA incentive grant, that you have the option when you apply for a community is either to turn that grant over to a solar city or to another solar apex. Sorry, Fred, I didn't want, I wanted to make sure you got, or you could have it run municipally. And that's the same thing that you're trying to do. At 20%, no service providers were interested in developing really in rural areas such as northern Warren County or Washington County. They would take that, what would have happened? They would have taken that 20% and gone right into urban areas and finished service in the urban areas and left the rural areas pretty well unprotected for doing this. So that 50% can be used for a variety of uses.
Reminds me of back in the 1920s with the running of telephone and electricity.
Exactly.
It was the same
Yep.
issue.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, Rural
Yeah.
Electrification Act in the 30s. And then it just went from farm to farm and strung the one wire. So that's been our approach is that needs to be done. But it needs to be for all of the state and all of Warren County. I mean, the lower, Glens Falls and Queensbury may have some spottiness, but for the most part, Town of Monroe, the same thing, they're well protected. You go up here, and that was the whole purpose 2 years ago when we brought the HUD people in, is to keep them out of Glens Falls, but to bring them up to Chester, to bring them over to Hadley and Corinth areas and over to Washington County, where there was no cell coverage, where there was no ability for them to download their documents that they needed to review from Washington. So, and there are some areas, like the Queensbury Hotel has a portion of the hotel you can obtain Wi-Fi, you can obtain coverage, but the other portion is not. So there are areas like that, but certainly you go north, that's what we need to focus on. And that's really the direction, I'm getting from Warren County to proceed in those areas.
Yeah.
There still will be some funds for metropolitan
Yeah, well, I
areas.
was more
Yeah,
concerned about
Yes.
the rural
absolutely.
and broadband to them. whether, you know, like you say, it's a solar situation, maybe grant funding will incentivize private
I think
companies
at
to come in.
50%,
Yeah.
a number of service providers have indicated that they will be, that they would be more helpful at the 50%.
All right, well, thank you.
That it, Ed, or?
One more item. I just wanted to mention, we have two special events coming out, EDC, that you are welcome to. On Thursday, December the 10th, we are having our holiday mixer. We'll get more information to you, and that's going to be on the top floor of 33 Glen Street, the Travelers Building in downtown. So you see the beautiful views of the Adirondacks at night glowing up there. And also, the next night, we have an EDC night. We have two games this year with the Adirondack Thunder, December 11th and February 12th. For $32, you get to go to both games, along with a pregame reception with light appetizers and a cash bar. The Thunder has now erased the Red Wings record by 2 games. They won in the last, they tied the game up in the last 2 minutes of the game last night in Kalamazoo, and then won in overtime. So they are 7-0, and they're continuing their road trip to this day. So.
Any other business? Fred?
Just like to report on the biomass. I think it was 3 years ago, we started working on a biomass project for Chester. And one of the obstacles we encountered was the fact that the local finance law would only allow us to finance for 10 years, and the engineer's reports indicated that it was a 12-year payback and a 25-year life. So we'd asked Senator Little to put in a bill to change the local finance law from 10 years to 15 years. And she did that last year, and it passed in the Senate and didn't pass in the Assembly. This year it passed in the Assembly first with Dan Steck co-sponsorship and Assemblyman McDonald, and then it passed in the Senate back in, I think it was June, and then the governor signed it. I think it was last week or the week before. So now we have an opportunity, municipalities have an opportunity to try to go to biomass, which creates an opportunity for the pellet manufacturers. What's happening in Thurman? You still have that
They're
pellet
looking,
manufacturer interested?
they're looking at some different properties in the town right now. I haven't heard any more other than that they are examining various properties to see if anything is, suitable
Right.
for their needs. We gave them some suggestions and wait to hear back.
I just think that's a great opportunity for a business model of manufacturing the pellets, and then the municipalities saving money on the heat.
Anything else? Privilege of the floor? Oh, you're adjourned. John and Evelyn. Okay, we're adjourned.